I always say that Shout Buffalo Bills football podcast listeners / fans are the best in the business because they always wait when Matt's late. And I am late again today. We got a lot of stuff going on here. Technology issues. My son cut his finger just now. My wife stopped putting my daughter to sleep, so I had to get that wrapped. It is a wild time here on this Tuesday. Very busy Tuesday. We close things down at One Bills Drive with Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott. And we are going to dive into everything that they said today, all the big things, all the big takeaways, give you our thoughts, and a couple day removed from the game thoughts on the Bills' season-ending loss to the Chiefs. Shout is brought to you by Topps Friendly Markets. It's foodball play offers in the Topps Red Zone. You could score big on flavor and savings and enhance your playoff weekend by creating recipes inspired by the distinct flavors of the playoff team cities. Topps' expert butchers have curated their recommended game day recipes over at topsmarkets.com/foodball. Head over there, get all the details. Ryan, how are you, my friend?
Hey, I am doing great. And, you said how hectic, it is. There's no off season for being a parent, and sometimes that happens just right before you're about to hit record on these live streams.
Seriously. Speaking, let's get some housekeeping in here. I was talking to our good friends over at Wingnuts over the last 2 days. Another just unbelievably explosive show the other night. It was so phenomenal. I mean, we can't say enough about the people that have come out to support these live events, hang out with us, create this environment inside the new Wingnuts Bar and Grill. And we are coming back. Get your calendars out. I know it's an off-season edition. I know you're probably bummed. Maybe you don't want to talk Buffalo Bills football, but come to Wingnuts. We can hang out. It'll be a great time. We are looking at the weekend of the 2nd and 3rd. What are you thinking, Ryan? We gotta come up with a date here. You want to go with the Saturday?
Yeah,
Either
one I'm okay with. I mean, I'm excited to get back to Wingnuts and talk Bills with the Bills Mafia. I do feel like Saturdays, it gives fans a little bit more time to make plans and get there, but I'm down for either night. You guys are working around me. I'm going to Arizona middle of the month for a little over a week. So looking forward, though, to getting there early on in February.
We get late night Talbot back in the broom closet. I can't wait. That is some great grade A podcasting.
You know it.
So, all right, let's get into the bill. So put the 2nd or the 3rd, probably the 3rd in your calendar. We'll get that nailed down in the next couple of days. We'll take some insider questions at the end of this episode as well. And if you have any questions on YouTube, which if you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel as well. Let's get into, the big picture stuff from Sean McDermott today. And I want to read one quote and I want to get your reaction and kind of dive into it and talk about it a little bit. He said, in reference to his takeaway from losing in the divisional round once again, and he said, listen, this is not a situation where you strip it down to the studs and start all over. We've done a lot of good things, and the players have done a lot of good things. I think you really start with understanding the success that we've had and how we've gotten it. And then you make tweaks along the way to try and get ourselves to become world champions. What do you think?
Yeah, you don't tear it down to the nuts and bolts. I agree with him completely there, but there's going to be some big changes, whether it's retirements, whether it's players leaving in free agency, whether it's just releasing some players that help you open up some cap space, because let's face it, there are some moves that need to be made on this roster. It's not a tear it down to the nuts and bolts type situation, but it's realizing that you have to replace some of the warped screws, so to speak, maybe with some fresh ones via the draft class. Bring in some talent on both sides of the ball. Get them mixed and matched in. And, we were talking about this pre-show. This is a team that's been very hesitant to get rookies out there immediately onto the field. And, to Buffalo's credit, we saw a lot of these players step up in year 2 where they've had a little bit more time to grow, whether you're talking Khalil Shakir, Terrel Bernard. so on and so forth. But we've also seen the Green Bay Packers model where you go young and you go through your lumps, but you're better off for it. We've seen the Chiefs do that a few years ago when they won a Super Bowl and they were very young. The Bills have to embrace that and realize that some of these guys that they draft this year, you can't wait until year 2 to expect them to be contributors. You need them on the field almost every single game as a rookie, and for 3 or 4 of them starting maybe week 1.
Yeah, and I think I never think that there's not a focus on adding talent around Josh Allen. I think that it's been there, whether or not you believe it's always been there for the last 4 years. I guess that's up for debate. But if you look at the last 2 seasons, I think that they've tried to add pieces, specifically last offseason, going out and getting Dalton Kincaid, going out and drafting Osiris Torrance and bringing in Connor McGovern, going out and bringing in 2 wide receivers in Trent Sherfield and Deontay Hardy, which, were lessons learned. That wasn't the move. I think the pivot now has to be, okay, and this was one of the bigger Brandon Beane takeaways that I had was, okay, you're going to have to play young players, but you're also going to have to go get some speed at wide receiver. And you're going to have to go into this draft. And with 10 draft picks right now, I think you have to focus. We got our G Master G in the YouTube channel saying first round wide receiver selection, first round wide receiver. And I'd come back in the 3rd round and get another wide receiver. This is a deep class. You could throw a lot of darts at the board. And I think you want to try to get as many players as you can. Especially if you get to the draft and you don't bring back Gabriel Davis. It's been an interesting couple of days for Gabe Davis. He said locker cleanout that he doesn't or he loves Buffalo, would definitely consider coming back, but it's a situation where he's got to go, test his market, go to free agency, see what's out there. Who knows? Can he turn around and maybe not get the kind of juice on the open market that he's looking for and maybe come back to the table with the Bills? Sure. Will the Bills consider that? Maybe, but I think it would have to be for a lot less than what he probably thinks he's worth. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think Gabe Davis has been really good for them, but I think that they have to almost envision a new role, like a new archetype for a player at that number 2 wide receiver position. I think Hardy was on the right track. I think going out and getting a guy that can get separation, that can give you some run after the catch is great. I think 2 offenses right now, young offenses from playoff teams. I look at the Detroit Lions and I look at the Houston Texans. What's one of the mainstay playmakers in their offenses? Tank Dell and Amon St. Brown. Those kinds of players, guys that can be, can go outside, can go inside, have that speed element, but can also potentially be your wide receiver 1 on the other end of the Stefon Diggs situation, whatever that ends up being. They need to go out and get somebody with speed, and I think the draft is going to provide that.
Yeah, it's absolutely got to come via the draft. And, you look at Gabe Davis, and I appreciated everything he did in his career here in Buffalo. Was an unbelievable blocking receiver this year. I know his stats were down in terms of the receiving perspective. Had a lot of big moments, though, as a receiver, too. But that being said, I feel like we know his ceiling in this offense in terms of the role that they envision for him, and that's not enough for Buffalo. Buffalo needs, like you said, someone that can come in, be wide receiver 2 as a rookie, and eventually maybe be the heir apparent for Stefon Diggs. Give Buffalo an actual threat opposite Stefon Diggs. You give Khalil Shakir a bigger role in year 3. And then I think you're really working with that trio. You still have, I see in the comments here about Justin Shorter. Yep. You don't know what he's going to bring to the table in year 2. He was more of a special teams kind of addition to this roster late in day 3. I know that they like his build, his physicality potentially, but we don't know what he's going to bring to the table necessarily. But they do have some guys in the mix for other roles, but they don't have that absolute number 2 wide receiver opposite Stefon Diggs. And I think the Bills can get that in round 1 of this draft, because here's the thing. There's going to be 3, 4, maybe 5 quarterbacks. I think 5 would be a little drastic. Definitely 3, though, if not 4 quarterbacks that go in round 1 of this draft. There's going to be a plethora of offensive tackles that go in the first round of this draft, Matt. I would probably say offensive tackle is one of the most talented overall group in this draft class. And yet there's wide receivers where that's pretty loaded too. So there's going to be a decent wide receiver, 2 or 3, that do fall into Buffalo's range in this first round. And while they still have other needs at defensive tackle, safety, elsewhere, you need to go after a wide receiver as long as there's at least one guy on that board or within your pick that you think this is the guy that can be that heir apparent for Stefon Diggs.
Bills Are Electric over on YouTube mentions that St. Brown is a 4th-round pick. Indeed, Tank Dell was a 3rd-round pick. It doesn't all have to come early in the draft. My point
Right.
being, you need to go out and probably get 2, and where you get them, I think you can go 2nd round and 4th round. You have to take a wide receiver in the first two rounds, in my opinion. Knowing the way that this game ended, the lack of explosives, not having one play go for more than 20 yards in this game. And, Sean McDermott said, I asked him, like, was this the plan? Was the plan because what's the one thing that he's harped on all season long? We can't turn the ball over. They didn't turn the ball over. They didn't have any turnovers. They controlled the time of possession. They kept Patrick Mahomes off the field. And it didn't matter because their offense wasn't explosive enough at times. And now you could say there was a couple explosives that just weren't hit, like Trent Sherfield dropped 2. Maybe you upgrade that position. Fine. Stefon Diggs dropped 1. You probably figure in most situations, he doesn't make that mistake. I still am interested to see if there's anything that's been going on with Diggs injury-wise. He popped up with that foot strangely there right before the playoff game. And I think he was on the injury report for something else during the season. I can't remember now. And I kind of just like scoffed at it because every once in a while guys will pop up and then they practice and you're like,
I feel like
it's
maybe
whatever.
oblique sticks out in my mind. It might have
So,
been.
both lower body injuries. And
Yeah.
you wonder how much that might have impacted. It's the same thing with Josh Allen. These guys downplay this stuff all season. And then we get to the end of the year and he's like, well, there was about 6 to 8 weeks where it was hampering him. He wasn't good until the final 4 weeks where he felt like he can actually throw the ball the right way. Which, side note, good news on the injury front for Allen is that he will not need shoulder surgery, which some fans were concerned about as the season was kind of laboring on there at about the 6 and 6 point. And Brandon Beane reemphasized that. So I think, anyway, long story short, we're going to get into the wide receivers in this draft class. We're going to start studying these receivers. We'll look at the free agent options as well. I still think that there probably is a wide receiver free agent or 2 that you could think about bringing in. Maybe Hardy's back. But wide receiver in the draft, to me, it's got to happen. At least 2. They got 10 picks right now. They could end up with more. You never know.
Yeah, with this many picks, and the Bills might use a few to move up or down the board at time. We'll move up the board and maybe, trade down 2 though to keep those picks in play. There's more than enough chance to add 2 wide receivers in this draft class if you really want to.
Well, where do you want to go next, my friend? If you're watching on YouTube, by the way, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel as well. Why don't we go to Von Miller next? What do you think about that?
I like that idea.
Yeah, so the Von thing is strange to me because I know that Beane and McDermott are going to, put on for their guy a little bit, right? Come out and they say today that they thought that was his best game of the season against the Chiefs. And Beane went into the details a little bit more and clarified that he thought he made some really good plays in the run game, which is fine. Like, if that's what you thought, that's fine. I mean, PFF gave Von Miller a 90.5 overall grade. I didn't feel that watching the game back. He was credited for 2 pressures. He had 2 hurries. I remember one in particular, but I guess maybe he played a better game. And I just was so unimpressed with the defensive line effort that I kind of, fell asleep on his snaps. Maybe I have to go back and watch it again. But the thing for me is they're banking on him coming back next season and being a year removed from the injury and being closer to the version that we saw last year. Ryan, they might have to depend on that because they're not going to have any free agent money to go after somebody. They're probably going to lose AJ Epenesa and Leonard Floyd unless one of those guys takes less money than you think, or there's not a market for them. And I can't see why either of those things will be the case. So in a lot of ways, money or not, you're going to kind of need to depend on 36-year-old Von Miller next year.
Yeah, and those 2 names you mentioned, maybe Floyd, because I think he'll look for more money after a very productive season, but the age will be something that lingers for some teams.
35-year-old Von Miller. Sorry.
Yeah. And then Epenesa, a young guy, I think he is probably going to find a decent contract out there. unfortunately, the way this contract is structured, they have to depend on it, and he's just going to be on this roster one way or another, and he'll probably see a sizable role. Again, is edge rusher a spot where the Bills can draft someone in the first with one of the first 4 or 5 picks? Yeah, and they would be foolish not to. Greg Rousseau had an outstanding year as a run stopper. He flashed a little bit as a pass rusher. We've been very high on Kingsley Jonathan as part of the rotation potentially. But Von Miller, you don't know what you're getting there. And right now you have him slotted to play a big role for this team. And, I will give him some credit for this game against the Chiefs. There was one play. He blew up a run in the backfield. And the only reason it didn't make the stat sheet is there were 2 penalties on that play by the Chiefs. And they accepted a holding penalty to back up Kansas City by 10 yards. There's another run play later in the game that he got in there and he made the play. So the instincts, the tackling, it was improving a little bit. We talked about the week against Pittsburgh. One good pass rush move. Getting close to sacking Mason Rudolph in that one. There's flashes, but flashes will not be enough in 2024. You're locked into that contract. It needs to be something where he is flashing the way he was early on in his tenure pre-injury with the Bills.
Yeah, and it is what it is. I mean, from a money perspective, you're kind of hamstrung with his case, and we could talk a little bit about Stefon Diggs here in a second. That case as well, whether or not you want to move on from him. I always think it's important to be forward thinking and trying to get ahead of like the huge drop off in production. Like the Von thing's different because his drop off in production is injury related. With Diggs, it's almost going to be a race against Father Time when he loses the parts of his game that make him such a spectacular player. It happens so fast. I mean, Julio Jones went from being this now they're different players. They win different. I think Julio Jones is a great route runner, but I think Stefon Diggs is like in that elite tier of route running that, there's going to be a lot of nuance to his game still, even after he does get a little bit older. But it's just like, do you want to be paying $25 million for that nuance at the stage of his career and the production that you're getting? That's a question that you're going to get. With Miller, you knew you were making your bed and you were going to have to sleep in it when you gave him 3 guaranteed years on that deal, knowing he was going to be 35 in the 3rd season. And there was a good chance that he could fall off. Now, we talked about when they signed him, Bruce Smith was a great example of a guy that played well into his 30s and still found a way to produce. The problem is when you throw an ACL injury into that, and just seeing Miller be like, he's such a positive guy all the time. Like he like emits that. Like for him to duck out on post-game interview after the game, he was one of the first out of the locker room. He told reporters that he was going to talk to us at locker cleanout. And then we look back at like a minute later and he'd grabbed his bag and his coat and he just dipped out and left. And he's a captain, right? Like, I mean, and who knows like what he was avoiding. Like, does he not want to talk more about some of the off the field stuff? Does he not want to talk about the fact that he played 14 games this season and didn't have a single sack? I don't know. He didn't talk. So I can't say what he was avoiding, but it's definitively a situation where he's probably going to be back, and you're going to, if you're a Bills fan, probably need to bank on him being some version of the player that he was.
Yeah, you said it. The Bills made their bed giving him this contract, and right now that that bed's pretty lumpy. It's not feeling so good, but they've got to get one more year out of it. And when that's said and done, they can trade it in. They can go get hopefully something a little bit newer, a little bit nicer. But you're throwing it all in on Von Miller in this 3rd year because that's the way this contract is structured. Unless something unforeseen happens this offseason where they can void some of those guarantees. He's coming back. It's part of the reason they're in a situation right now with this cap space or lack thereof. So it is what it is, and it's not ideal because, like you said, you throw an injury into it. And now, it's not as easy for a guy in his mid-30s to produce at the level of the Bruce Smiths of the world that we talked about. But Buffalo has to make it work. They have to find the right mix of guys to rotate in. and hope that Miller really does kind of go back to what he was showing early on in his tenure with Buffalo.
Comment here, I believe it's from Christine. Feel like Epenesa got shortchanged with Von's return. Wish he could return to the Bills. I just brought him up on Spot Track to see if the market value had been put up yet for Epenesa, and it hasn't. So let's play a little game here. What do you think his market value is going to be once that is set over at Spot Track? I'm actually working on having Mike Giannitti, who runs SpotTrack.com, on the show here at some point, and maybe he can give us a little bit of a preview of that.
So, and one, I love Mike's site. Sometimes, though, he's even said that the projections are a little higher based on a formula that he uses. I don't think he'll get 10 million a year, but I could see that being the projection where he gets something closer to 7.5, 8 million per year with, a good amount guaranteed.
Say that again. Sorry, you kind of broke up there. What was the number you said?
I said like 7.5 to 8 million per year, but with a good guarantee.
Okay. 7.5 to 8 million a year. Yeah. I think, I'll be interested to see if he gets that. I'm trying to look and see, of course, all the market values that are up on the site right now. So here's a good one. Kayla Von Chason, former first round draft pick. He is 24, 3 years in the league. So he is actually, I think he was in the same draft class as Epenesa. Let's put their, what do you think his stats were from this season?
I have no idea. I'm not even going to try to guess because I don't know.
See, I don't like when you don't play the guessing game with me. That's
but I
disappointing.
haven't followed this guy's career at all.
It's
So
okay. He had 2 sacks. He's not a starter. He's not an every down player. So that's not a good comparison. He had 2 sacks this season, and over the course of his career, 5. His market value set at 5 or at 3 million average annual. So I think that's probably 7.5, 8 million is probably closer to what it'll be. Josh Uche, what do you think his is? New England Patriots pass rusher.
Yeah, I'm more familiar with his game.
Let me give you his stats first before you have to
Go
guess.
ahead.
So he had 3 sacks this season in 15 games, but had 11.5 sacks in 2022. That was his big season. So a lot of this projection has that season baked in.
Right. 9.
14.5 million AAV. Now, to your point, usually a little bloated.
Yeah.
But still, if he gets over 10, then, I mean, we're going to talk about AJ Epenesa possibly getting just under that ballpark. So if he gets say he gets 12, I mean, you're probably the cheapest you're getting Epenesa at that point is probably what, 10 million?
Yeah, something like that. I had to put a comment up on the screen here, Matt.
Yeah, great.
Thought
6.5
it was very timely from Mrs. Parrino. Pretty critical of Ryan for not playing the guessing game, considering you hate playing Jeopardy with me and your 9-year-old.
Wow, dude. You had to throw the 9-year-old in there? You couldn't just say it was you? Brutal. Just absolutely brutal. Listen, here's the thing with Jeopardy. One thing that's always annoyed me about Jeopardy with Caitlin is I won't be in the room. Like, nobody will be in the room. And she'll be watching Jeopardy and she'll be answering the questions out loud. Like, what do we think about that? I feel like
if she goes on the real show.
Like, if you're watching like Jeopardy and nobody's in the room, are you like saying the answers out loud?
So Jeopardy would probably be a bad example for me, but Wheel of Fortune, I do yell out the puzzle. I yell it out if I know it. So I'm kind of on Team Caitlin with this one because if I know it before those contestants, I'm very proud of myself. And it happens more than you'd think.
Here's the real truth, okay? I stink at Jeopardy. So I don't like playing with her because she's a history teacher and brilliant. So like, cool. Like, you're gonna beat me every time. Like that's like when I take Lucas out into the driveway and I put the hoop down to 7 feet and I just yam it on his face. Like, is that good for him? Is that good for anybody? Should we be celebrating that? It's the same concept.
Yeah. Dunking on your kid though. Nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that. That's fair. All right, where do you want to go next?
I guess we should probably talk about Oh, what was the clip that you wanted? Oh,
Oh
Terrel
yeah, let's
Bernard.
get that clip
Yeah,
going.
let's get that
That's a good.
going.
That's good. I really wanted to cover that. All right, so Brandon Beane was asked about Terrel Bernard. We got a little bit of insight into his week last week, and I think Bills fans will really appreciate this. I want to talk a little bit about it.
This kid, he wanted to play. So, like, the doctors told us after the Pittsburgh game, like, you can count him out for the Chiefs game. And this kid kept saying, every day, I'm playing. You saw him running in the pools. And we go work him out the day before the game. And some of the things looked good. Some of it, he still struggled. And he got done and knew he couldn't do it. And just the tears in his eyes, I almost had tears in my eyes. And that's what gets you excited. And you got guys like him on your team, you're going to go a long way. And I had high respect for him, but this is a business, and sometimes guys make business decisions, and you understand and respect it. This guy was going to go out there and play on one leg and one foot if he had to, and we had to protect him from himself.
I mean, that's Terrel Bernard. I mean,
Right.
if you want to talk about, and this is why I push back so much when people criticize Beane's draft record, and it hasn't all at certain times. I mean, I think there's real credibility to doing that. Like there was times early in this season, going into this season, where had Terrel Bernard not stepped up in a big way, Christian Benford step up in a big way, Osiris Torrance and Dalton Kincaid. I mean, a lot of like fresh faces. Like there's a lot to kind of sink your teeth into, but I feel like draft success has to come in waves, right? And it was interesting hearing Brandon Beane talk today. He knows what's on the line in this draft coming up. I mean, with 10 picks now, we talked about it. Like he's going to have to hit on a lot of those once again. Terrel Bernard was an absolute home run, an undersized guy at the time. When Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds were entrenched, and you were like, wait, what's going on here? Why are they drafting this player with these two guys when they have other needs? Like fans wanted a cornerback at the time, fans wanted a wide receiver at the time, all these things. You get down the road and they did their work on the person, and if it's a perfect fit into their room. And I've told stories on this show about seeing the amount of time he spends studying in the locker room when other guys are listening to music and playing cards and doing other stuff. Terrel Bernard is in his book all the time. Like the guy, they're almost to a point where I think it's unhealthy, right? Like you got to do other things, right?
Right.
But it's a work ethic. It's a deal. I think they got a real good one in Bernard.
Yeah, I remember when they drafted Bernard, and you're right, there were people saying you need this position, and they talked about how impressive he was at the whiteboard, and the Bills would give him something, he'd be able to draw it up, he'd be able to diagnose and explain exactly what everyone's role is supposed to be on that given play. And the rookie year, he did go out there at one point, he kind of looked like a deer in headlights. But then this year was just a revelation, and you saw exactly what Brandon Beane and the scouts and the coaches saw in Bernard, and you saw him come along. And you mentioned this draft class from 2022. Kyrie Elam, yes, it's the book still out on him. We're gonna have to wait and see what he becomes. But James Cook, that's a hit, finishing in the top 4, top 5 in all the total purpose yards as a runner receiver. Terrel Bernard, unbelievable year. Khalil Shakir, Matt Ariza, and I know Matt Ariza is not in the league right now, but they needed a punter. He had the biggest leg. It made sense at the time. Christian Benford, an absolute hit in round 6. Luke Tenuta no longer with the team. And then Balin Spector, who you look at that linebacker position, Matt, and you have Matt Milano and Terrel Bernard as your top 2 coming back next season, and that's an elite duo. But then you have a guy like Balin Spector, who really did flash when given the opportunity late in this season. You have Dorian Williams entering year 2, and that's a position you feel really strong about right now. But for Bernard itself, you love seeing that he was doing everything in his power to try to get onto the field after suffering a very serious injury where he needed to be carted off. But you also have to appreciate Buffalo's stance and the Bills' stance, saying we can't let you get out there. We have to protect you from yourself. And that's, it's good to do with a young player. I think sometimes veteran players might I don't want to say not listen, but might feel like they can do a little bit more because they've been in the league longer, like a Rasul Douglas, for instance. I don't think he looked right out there against the Chiefs, but he's an older player in terms of the years he's been in this league. He probably thought he could do a little bit more where when it came to a young player like Bernard, the Bills kind of stepped in and said, you have a lot of years in front of you. We don't want something bad going wrong here. But you really do appreciate the sentiment and the effort that he really put in this past week.
What do you think, after hearing Sean and Brandon talk a little bit about Micah Hyde today, and we can also get into some of the other injury updates, Tre'Davious White and Matt Milano, when Brandon Beane was asked about those two, he didn't have a definitive timeline, but he thought that Milano was further along than Trey the last time he got an update. Neither of them would have been ready to come back this season. So those hoping for Milano to come back for a Super Bowl, potentially, that wasn't in the cards. Not to mention, I think we even saw with Daquan Jones, as good as it was to have him back, and I think he was an upgrade at the percentage that he was at, he wasn't the same guy from the first 4 weeks. And it's hard to be that. And when you're dealing with a pec, I remember talking to John Feliciano about that back in the day. It's a really tough injury to come back from and then play with. Damian Harris, I know a lot of people asking about him. It was his decision to kind of shut it down for the season with the neck injury. And so he's getting to a spot where he's almost ready to start training again. Beane said he'll be ready, probably ready to play by the start of free agency. So we'll see where he ends up. And then the expectation is Nyheim Hines, who had the torn ACL in the jet ski accident in August, he will be back with the Bills. And Beane expects his timeline to be ready about the start of training camp.
It's interesting at the running back position. Damian Harris, first of all, you and I both talked about it, speculated on it. And we said this was a neck injury. This was something that was pretty serious at the time. I know they said after the game, things came back a lot more positive than that they were anticipating. He was also a brand new dad at that time. I think a lot goes into that where you say, I just need to shut it down. Mentally, physically, it probably scared him a little bit, and that's okay. And his tenure wasn't what I expected it to be. I remember our bold prediction show. I nailed the Dalton Kincaid prediction, but I missed wildly on Damian Harris. I think I said 10 plus touchdowns for this Bills team, not even close. Nyheim Hines, though, if back with this team, someone in here says he'll have to be a cap casualty. We'll have to look at that and see if maybe there's something to be done with this contract. But I'm excited about the potential of Nyheim Hines in this offense, because of what we've seen from Joe Brady in terms of getting the ball to the backs. Now, again, we have to wait and see if Joe Brady ends up being the offensive coordinator for the team in 2024, but he certainly has Josh Allen's vote. He seems to have the vote of confidence from a lot of guys in this locker room. I'm all in support of Buffalo doing an extensive search, or at least seeing what else is out there. I've seen some Bills fans talk about like an Eric Bieniemy, guys like that, someone trying to get some explosive, someone trying to get this offense to look a little bit more to, or play more to Josh's strong suit. I get that, but this wasn't the Joe Brady offense this year either. This was the Ken Dorsey offense that Brady inherited and had to use. So if he does come back, I would be excited to see what Hines would look like in this offense. I'm still a big fan of Ty Johnson. I think that getting him back on a cheap deal would be nice, but running backs are easy to get in terms of undrafted free agents, late round picks that can contribute. With the cap space, with everything else, it's going to be a position where the Bills probably don't want to invest much money in that spot.
Bieniemy would be the ultimate, to me, desperation move to finally figure out a way to beat the Chiefs. It's like, okay, you were with the Chiefs for a decade or whatever it was, a little under a decade. Come over here, give us all the secrets, help bring the success of that offense and elements of that offense to what we do. That's interesting. Who do you think would be some of the candidates? Like, you see Cliff Kingsbury interviewing all over the place.
Yeah, his name is being around.
What would you think about maybe the Bills interviewing him? I know, I'm trying to think, Shane Waldron, he signed somewhere, I think, the former Seattle offensive coordinator. And then, or maybe he interviewed with New Orleans, I'm not sure. And then, who else would be a potential older offensive core? You know who I was wondering? Kellen Moore. Did you see that report that he was, they denied an interview even without a head coach.
Huh.
So maybe they want him in place if Harbaugh agrees to sign, and they're
Right.
denying the interview for him, which I thought was because if
Yeah.
he ended up hitting the market, I think Kellen Moore would be an interesting name.
Right. And I see here in the chat too, Alex Van Pelt.
I'm out on that. I'm also out on Frank Reich.
Well, yeah, and Frank, I get that. I thought that Alex Van Pelt, though, was kind of a scapegoat. He doesn't even call the plays in Cleveland. Some Browns fans told me it was probably to bring in someone that can help Stefanski work around Deshaun Watson's skill set. Which,
Unbelievable that that's
yeah,
where we're at with
if
that
that's
story.
where it's at, that's where it's at. But Van Pelt was the actual coach that helped them win a playoff game a few years ago because Stefanski had COVID and wasn't allowed to be there. So I've seen some talent from Van Pelt over the years in terms of being an OC. But again, I always feel a little iffy about those former Bills players coming back. And, I know he wasn't like an all-time great player or anything like that, but he's another veteran guy because you mentioned that. So there are names out there. At least see what's out there. But I would like to see Joe Brady return.
Circling back to Micah Hyde, his wife put out a love letter to Bills Mafia today. I highly recommend everybody go read it. It was really nice. It was a nice letter to Buffalo because kind of detailed in there like when they got here from Green Bay, they knew nothing about Buffalo. And as his wife was probably like, okay, well, we're going to Buffalo. Like, what's this going to be like? And they fell in love with the city. And she said in there that depending on what happens, like we'll retire from the field, but we'll graduate into being a member of Bills Mafia as a fan. And it was a cool letter. And I think Micah Hyde, to me, he's a Wall of Fame candidate. I don't know if he ever ends up getting up there, but what he's meant to this team, I don't know. Like, where do you if it ends here? What are your thoughts on if it will end here? I do think he'll either sign elsewhere or retire. Just because of the money. I don't know if the money is going to work, and I don't think that they even have like $3 million to spend on that safety position. Because if you heard Brandon Beane say, he said specifically like $2.5 million. There was a couple moves. Poona Ford comes to mind. That was the range of his contract. It's like, if we give you $2.5 million, you better be helping us win. I almost felt like that was kind of a shot at Poona Ford, but I thought he had some good snaps late in the season games, but. Does Hyde, what's the Hyde situation and where is his place? With the rest of the group, like the Lorenzo Alexanders, the Kyle Williams, the who was the other one? Jerry Hughes, like that group. Where do you put Hyde in the hierarchy of that group?
I put him behind Kyle Williams, but in front of Lorenzo.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I do. I know he had some accolades, some Pro Bowls. I can't remember if wasn't he a second team All Pro one of the years at least.
Yes, and was Poyer the first team All Pro?
I can't remember. It was a flip flop, so
Yep.
one or the other. But he's just meant so much to this defense, so much to this team that's kind of how I rank it. It's not just all accolades. I loved what Lorenzo Alexander did for this team, how he came on here the first few seasons. Same with Jerry Hughes and what he meant. And it all might be a moot point because the Bills haven't really used that Wall of Fame in some time in terms of bringing players in. And there's some other guys like Eric Moulds and some others that aren't even on it right now.
Moulds not being on the Wall of Fame is egregious.
It is. It absolutely
what's going
is.
on here?
And there's still guys from the Super Bowl era. There's some guys from the AFL era that I thought should be on it. That aren't. So I get you.
I think
don't
you should
want
write 2,000 words on the AFL players that should be on the Wall of Fame. I think that's your next assignment.
Listen, Bird is my number one. He leads the team in franchise history in interceptions, and he's not on the Wall of Fame. Get out of here. Get out of here.
Jairus Bird?
No, not Jairus Bird. He wasn't on the AFL teams. George Bird. So unbelievable player, and I thought that he deserved.
Dude, I know how to get you riled up, don't I?
You do.
I know how to get you going. No. Dude, I'm so disappointed. We had
Butch Bird. Thank you.
We had a 12 hours of travel time on our docket for this weekend. Had the Bills won. We were driving to Baltimore. I was going to pick you up in old Salamanca. Not Salamanca. I actually found the perfect spot. Joelle would have only had to drive you like 15 minutes.
Yeah, I saw that. You're like, do you think she can drop you off here? I'm like, yeah, I think she can handle a 14-minute, drive.
But here's the thing. Were you a little nervous about getting back in the car with me after our last
You know,
excursion?
after almost dying that one point, it wasn't ideal. However, that's usually at least a once a trip with Joel too. So,
Oh, fired. I love it. All right, let's transition quickly.
Real quick though, Micah
Yeah, go
Hyde,
ahead.
my
Yeah, go on,
prediction.
Micah.
I think he might. I think this is the year he would retire. I think again, it goes back to what I said about Damian Harris. Neck injuries are nothing to fool around with. This is a veteran safety, young family, been in this league for quite some time. I could certainly see him calling it a career after this year.
It has been an amazing year on the Shout Buffalo Bills Insider text line. You guys have been so awesome supporting this new venture of our coverage, brings us, gets us connected with our fans, and you can become a member right now. And I know you're probably sitting there thinking, do I want to sign up for the off season? This is the best time. I mean, I think this is, when we start throwing around some ideas, we'll be chatting with fans. We'll be doing some private Zooms with our group as well. Just talking it out. We're available. You got a draft question. You got a player you want us to look at, do some research on. Do you want to, talk about some free agency, some cap stuff, all that stuff will be available this offseason on the Shout Buffalo Bills Insider text line, 716-528-6727. Send that a text, sign up from there, and then it's $3.99 a month after a 2-week free trial. The Shout text line is brought to you by Carrie C. Byer, attorney with the law offices of Francis M. Litro, located at 237 Main Street, Buffalo, New York. If you or someone you know is seriously injured, give him a call, 716-852-1234, or check out litrolaw.com. Mike Kirkland, one of our regulars, said, you guys made the season a lot more enjoyable. Thanks for all your commentary on the text line. Having to listen to all the postseason window closing stuff will be painful, especially with no proof to the contrary. There's been a lot of talk about Brady being over-reliant on the run, not trying to be more explosive to make up for the Mahomes factor in the game the other day. If our defense made more stops, I couldn't really fault it. What say you? Or any last thoughts? See you next year. If you see Josh, give him a hug from all of us. He's our hero. I didn't see Josh. Well, I saw him on Monday, but I did not give him a hug.
Yeah, and probably not a good idea to approach the players and give hugs. I had like the world's longest train just go through there, and as much as I'm sure you missed the train whistle, that guy was obnoxious with it. So I was sitting here stewing, waiting for that to end. But real quick, the text line, I wanted to touch upon that when you were talking. Bills Mafia, top 30 visits, virtual interviews. When we have that information, we give it to the insiders first. Interest in players. We didn't have this text line early enough to do it this past year, but when I had the Puna Ford interest and some of these other players, that's going to go to the text line first. So there is no off season in the NFL. Join this text line. We will make it worth your while.
For sure. So Mike's question is, having to listen to the postseason window closing stuff will be painful, especially with no proof to the contrary. There's been a lot of talk about Brady being over-reliant on the run against the Chiefs and not trying to be more explosive to make up for the Mahomes factor. If our defense made more stops, I couldn't really fault it. What say you? So just in terms of the general approach, and I thought Ryan or Sean McDermott said today that it wasn't the plan to go in and drain the clock and worried about getting the defense off the field or anything like that. It was just more about like having a balanced attack, trying to be multiple, and they did take their shots. They just didn't hit their shots. I feel like, if they hit 2 of those explosive throws, those 20+ yard throws, we're probably talking about this in a different way. I didn't have a massive problem with the game plan or even the way that Joe Brady executed it. I mean, if they score that touchdown, that's 31 points. In the game, if they finish that last drive, and I'm fine with that offensive performance, especially in a game where the defense only had the 1 turnover, which was more of a touchdown saving play than it was, a field flipping play.
You can go back and you rewatch these games and you say, gosh, if Tyrell Dodson was able to corral that fumble early in the game, deep in Bills territory. You have the Jordan Poyer turnover. The game plan that the Bills had would have been absolutely perfect because it would have taken, at least one, both of those would have taken points off the board. Obviously, the Poyer one did for the Bills, and the Dodson one would have taken points off too. I like Buffalo's game plan in this matchup, whether they planned it that way or not. The Bills were in position to take the lead with under 2 minutes to go. Josh Allen saw and read the Shakir play correctly. He just got contacted when he was releasing the ball, and it threw it off a little bit. I know that you wouldn't want that defense necessarily out there with less than 2 minutes to go against Patrick Mahomes, but I'd rather take a lead in that situation late in the game than trying to draw the clock all the way down to 0 and win it on a final play. The defense was kind of coming into its own, and the game plan itself also worked for me from the perspective that Buffalo was playing with 4 linebackers in this game, and they were banged up in game at that position. They were playing with a lot of backups on the back end. This was, these were guys that were getting their most playing time since the preseason for the Bills for some of them. So the game plan was smart, limiting Mahomes' series. We saw Mahomes shred that defense quite a few times. I like the way that the Bills kind of ran things. I like the way everything worked out. I know at the end of the day, the Bills didn't win this game, but they were put in a position to get it done. And oh, by the way, if Stefon Diggs and Trent Sherfield make those catches, you have another like 150, 160 yards passing for Josh Allen as well. I mean, the opportunities were there to make big plays, to get those explosives. It just didn't work out in that given Sunday.
Let's throw a bone to our YouTube viewers, if you will. Man O' War, one of our regulars. We've had our conversations over the years. Hi, who in your opinion are the players which are must be retained? So I'm bringing up, let's take that first look real quick, Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
And we're obviously going to spend so much time diving into this over the next couple of weeks and months. But 20 unrestricted free agents the Bills have heading into the offseason. Micah Hyde, Daquan Jones, Leonard Floyd, Tim Settle, Jordan Phillips, Tyler Medikevich, Poona Ford, Dane Jackson, Tyrell Dodson, David Edwards, Trent Sherfield, Damian Harris, Taylor Rapp, Linval Joseph, AJ Epinesa, Shaq Lawson, Latavius Murray, Kyle Allen, Cam Lewis, and Gabe Davis. Quentin Morris is a ERFA. So we'll see. I would imagine he ends up being back. Of the 20 names I just read, there's only 3 of them that I consider gotta have them back. Daquan Jones.
Mm-hmm.
And the next 2 might surprise you. David Edwards.
Okay.
And Taylor Rapp. Those are my 3. Gotta have them back.
Edwards would actually maybe be at the top of mine, just because I'm also thinking salary cap, and do the Bills even have the money for Daquan Jones?
Right.
He would be number 1 for me if I knew the Bills had the money to bring him back, to get him back on this team. That's the only thing, is I just know that this roster, it's going to be tough to keep those really good players. He did really enjoy his time in Buffalo. Maybe it does work out that way, but Edwards was great for Buffalo in terms of the run game, the extra linemen. You saw Aaron Cromer's unit take a big step in year 2, and I would like to think that Edwards and his experience playing with Cromer even factored into that, helping those guys out. And I would love to have him here in for another year to help Osiris Torrance in year 2, to help some young guys like Ryan Vandemark and Alec Anderson and these up-and-coming guys that I'm sure are eventually going to turn into key reserve players on this team. So he would be very high on my list. Taylor Rapp makes a lot of sense too, because of how well he played down the stretch for this team. They did, he started out a little bit rough, but then you got to see him, how he fit into the scheme, his instincts, the Bills possibly being very shorthanded at safety too, needs to be considered. So I actually really like that list, Matt.
Cool. Let's go to the next one here. Get to another couple more insider texts. Donna Fazio says, hi there. I have a question. From listening to the pressers, it seems like the team is aware they need to add something to help increase explosive plays for the offense. but with cap restrictions and as being clearly stated, no splash moves are in the budget. Do you think that indicates that the team plans to solve their explosive play problem exclusively through the draft, wide receiver first round? To me, Ryan, not only like we mentioned early in the show, is like that the main vehicle to that production or that skill set. I don't think they're going to be able to shop in the deep end of the pool
Right.
of playmakers in free agency. I just don't think that's going to be an option. So you're looking at another Deontay Hardy there. I think you got to really make your meat, if you will, with the draft.
Yeah, it's got to be the draft, and this is a deeper class at wide receiver. You could
I
get
meant to say
maybe
make your hay, by the way. I meant to
make
say
your
make
hay.
your hay, not
You
make your
could.
meat. All these tops reads, Ryan, got me in
They're
a
getting
real
to
weird
you.
place.
They're getting to you. No, I mean, you could get the best all around wide receiver with your first pick in round one, because there's going to be some really good receivers at the end of round one that maybe don't have that blazing speed. But the round three, round four area, that's when you can try to get those burners. We've seen the Bills even, now in these future contracts who they've brought in here. Some of the guys that they've signed to the reserve deals. One that comes to mind is a KJ Hamler. And listen, KJ Hamler has not had any NFL career worth writing about right now, but he's a former second round pick. I saw a lot of his games in college. My dad's a big Penn State fan. He has explosive speed. Leading up to that draft, he ran a 4.27. He has the speed. He's had terrible luck with injuries. But those are the guys that, like you said, you take flyers on. You say, if we can get this guy healthy, he could be that speed to give us that explosive option. So that's someone to keep in mind. But definitely the draft is their number one priority because, one, those contracts are cost controlled. And with the way the Bills salary cap is right now, especially with some of these bloated contracts that they can't get out of next year, you need to keep that in mind and try to get the best possible players in a lot of the time. That'll be through the draft because, like you said, you're not getting these big name wide receivers in free agency to come in on a low end deal.
You're right. I'm just looking up his numbers here really quick. His long last season was a 55-yard touchdown, and his rookie season was a 49-yard touchdown. So shows off some of that long speed. He had 30 catches for 381 yards and 3 touchdowns in his rookie year. That's when he played 13 games, and it's just been injuries after that. And to me, this reminds me, Hamler, of like an Isaiah McKenzie type signing, a guy that you just take off of a practice squad when nobody's thinking about him, right? Like struggling with fumbles there in Denver, and he comes in and he plays a really important role for them for a couple of years. You're getting a KJ Hamler who at 24 years old, still has some potential. This is a former second round pick.
Yeah.
That I think I like the move. It's one that these are the kinds of things that you just stash and figure it out in the spring and hope that he can, make a move. And shout out to Ronnie Eastman on our chat line because he asked this question. I'm curious what role they potentially see for KJ Hamler. I think he's going to fit right into that like Isaiah McKenzie role, and maybe they move on from like a Hardy who's going to be more expensive and they could save some money.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of these reserve contracts and deals. And Hamler's one guy that I think could help them move on from some deals. Richard Garage, lineman that the Bills signed as an UDFA. We were very impressed with him this summer. What does he look like in year 2? Jamarcus Ingram, we've talked about him at cornerback. He might be able to claim one of those last cornerback spots next year. I was big on Tyrell Shavers as a UDFA, wide receiver position there. So they have guys that are going to be in the mix here for a roster spot. Now, mind you, not starting roles. Cameron Klein, too, who, by the way, last roster projections, you and I, we spent some time on Shout talking about, does he make the final roster? So he's a reserve guy. So there might be 3 or 4 guys on these reserve contracts that come in and claim a roster spot next year at low contracts. And that's big for this team, knowing that a lot of these players were on the practice squad for the majority of the year. Hamler has that speed that they're looking for. Obviously, a newer addition, not on the practice squad like some of these other guys. But I think that you're going to have some guys step up here, man. Before we get to the next maybe insider question, a great question here in the chat. from Nathan. How do you join the text line, Matt?
All you got to do is text 716-528-6727. When you send that text, you'll get one back with a link. Follow that link, put in some information, sign up, you get a 2-week free trial just to check it out. Then after that, it's $3.99 a month. Now, I will say this. Give us a little leeway here over the next couple of weeks. I want to take some days off, most likely. So there might be some, hot and cold. When I'm off, Ryan tends to pick it up a notch. When he's off, I tend to pick it up a notch. So you're not going to go without, being able to reach us. But in this next 2-week window till after the Super Bowl, it might be a little bit quieter. So maybe you want to wait until, early February. But we'll be continuing to push it, and we're there. We're going to do a Zoom session, probably one of these playoff weekends on a Sunday when everybody's watching the games, and just hang out together, talk some football. I think that'll do it for this episode. We're at almost an hour. I can't believe how long we went here, but we will be back later this week with one more episode this week. I got a cool one. A fellow Bills podcast is, somebody that we met at Turning Stone. He works there and is a host of a Bills podcast with another gentleman that I actually worked with at Blockbuster 15 years ago. We got to reconnect. It was so fun, like such a small Buffalo story. So they're going to come on. We're going to talk some Bills topics. It'll be super fun. I'll give you some information about their podcast where you can find it. It'll be fun. I like hanging out with my friends, and I haven't seen him in a long time, JJ Bryce. So we'll bring him on. It'll be fun. Head over to topsmarkets.com right now and go get yourself a wonderful cut of meat at any location. Real meat, real butchers. While the other stores have their meat packed in central processing facilities, Tops has real butchers you can trust to serve the very best to your family. Expert butchers hand cut fresh, high-quality USDA choice beef and premium pork in-store daily. Visit topsmarkets.com/realbutchers for more information and tips from your trusted Tops butchers. All right, he's Ryan Talbot. Give us the final word.
Yeah, final word here. One, Matt, better wear that Blockbuster shirt. I know. Super chat.
Gotta get that super chat
Bernardo.
in. Man of War says, "What is Blockbuster? Get out. Get out, Man of War. Are you young? Are you a youngster? Were you not here for Blockbuster 15 years ago when it went out of business? It was where people used to get movies. You didn't have to just bring up an app on your TV. You had to go to an establishment. You had to walk the aisles. You had to go to the classics and decide, do I want a new release or do I want to go old school? Go back to the classics. Go back to play the hits, if you will. I miss it. It's great days.
Yeah, so rock that Blockbuster shirt for that podcast.
Bernardo Dietze. McDermott can't stop a turtle running against him in big days, in big games. Not a fan of Bernardo. He's not a fan of Sean McDermott.
He is not.
It goes back a long way. He's going to stay on the train. Wants him gone. And we also have another super chat that I missed from earlier in the show. What is going on? The way Bernard studied on and off the field gives me hope for Elam. Mark my words, if Elam is given his chance this year, he'll be at least CB2. I agree. I think Elam deserves more of a chance. And maybe we could talk a little bit about Elam. I sent out a text about my conversation with Elam. Maybe we can hit that real quick before we get out of here.
Do it. Yep, we got to do it.
Or do I give you a cliffhanger, Zach of all trades? Zach of all trades, send me a DM on Twitter if you're not an insider, since you just gave us a super chat, which is $5, which is more than 1 month of being an insider. And I will send you the text that I sent on Elam, and we will talk about it on a future episode of Shout, because we got to get out of here.
It is juicy. It's juicy, Bills Mafia. Join Shout, and Matt will send it to you.
Join Shout Insider text line. Send me a text. I'll send it to you. All right. We got to get out of here, dude. It's almost an hour. I'm exhausted. It's been a long week. It's been an amazing season. Year 6 on the beat for me. What is this? Year what for you?
I've been here since 2016.
This is year 8 for you.
Yeah, year 8, and then throw in Scout, and I'm a little over a decade.
Yeah, you're older than me.
I'm old.
In Bill's time. In Bill's time, you're older than me. Not in real time. In real time, I'm 41. You're 39.
That's right. We got to get out of here.
That hurts my heart. All right, that'll do it. Everybody's like, dude, end the stream right now.
Yeah,
Ryan
we're just-
Talbot, Matt Parrino. We will see you on Friday. Take care, everybody.